What are some of your thoughts around AWS storage cost optimization best practices? Do you know them? Do you understand them? Well, our next speaker, a senior storage specialist at AWS, is going to help guide us through some of the best practices. Please join me in welcoming Anthony Fiore from AWS. Anthony has over 25 years in the IT industry and over 4+ years at AWS. And I have to say, Anthony is a longtime friend. Anthony, thank you so much for joining us.
Good to be back, John.
Wow, they're just blowing up the screen.
Oh,
Anthony, you got a fan base out there.
Thanks for the love. All right. Well, thank you all very much for your time today. This has been a really fun day so far. And what I'm about to talk to you about is we've already had some really great presentations on things like S3 Storage Lens and the right S3 tier for you. But I'm going to take some edge cases where I speak with customers sometimes, and they may not be that knowledgeable about how to optimize other costs. S3 is always a big one, right? But there's some really great tools out there that we have and that our partners have that that can also help you with some of our cost optimization. So for the next 15 some odd minutes, we're gonna talk about some of them. So first is EC2 Compute Optimizer. Well, this is a storage conversation. Why are we talking about EC2 Compute Optimizer, Anthony? Well, for the simple reason of the fact that EC2 Compute Optimizer has since enhanced itself to where it's providing recommendations for your EBS volumes, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But I want to start with some of the different volume types we have for EBS. So if you've been around AWS a while, like I have, you'll notice that over time we keep growing in terms of the types of volumes that we have. We started very simple, right? Magnetic storage, and now we've got IO2 Block Express, IO2 which is replacing IO1. IO1 is still available. We've got GP3 now, which basically decouples the need for a large volume to drive the right amount of IOPS in our general purpose SSD volumes. But with all of this, right, a lot of customers, and myself included sometimes, struggle with, okay, what's the right IOPS level what do I really need, right? What's the right volume type for me? And this is where Compute Optimizer can actually help. Yes, Compute Optimizer, because there is a portion of that also helps you with EBS volume recommendations. So typically what we see folks doing, and by the way, this is free. This is absolutely free. You don't need to pay more. I know that Compute Optimizer has an advanced metrics setting similar to like Storage Lens. But this is free. This is out of the box. You can go right into the AWS console, AWS console now, and search for EC2 Compute Optimizer, and it will be there. It's either going to be under EC2 Compute Optimizer or Compute Optimizer. I'm pretty sure it's Compute Optimizer when I was in there yesterday. But really, what it's going to be able to do is, if you're like me, unfortunately, the geek that I am, I love starting with something that's probably the least cost effective, right? Drive the most IOPS, drive the most throughput, when really I'm just running a web server, but I want it to be fast, right? But that's not going to be very good from a cost optimization perspective, because over time, I'm going to be over provisioned for what I don't need, right? So what's nice about this is Compute Optimizer is going to give me those recommendations in terms of what's the optimal IOPS setting for my IO2 or IO1 volumes, right? Also for optimizing the size of my GP2 volumes, and optimizing the IOPS and throughput recommendations for my GP3 volumes. So a couple things to mention here. So this is only going to work on EBS volumes that are attached to EC2 instances, and they must be attached to EC2 instances for at least 30 hours. The recommendations themselves are refreshed daily. And they're generated by analyzing the specifications and utilization metrics of the current volume over the period of the last 14 days. So this is general. And there are a specific set of requirements so that have to be met for this. So usually it's going to take up to 12 hours, possibly a day or more, for these recommendations to be generated. But what's nice about this is there's no more guesswork. This is all metric-driven information that's going to help you understand your workload and understand, are you right-sized? Are you in the right volume type? Are your knobs the most optimal? So how do you look at this? So here's a sample output of what this looks like. So This is basically, so there's basically two ways to look at this. So this is kind of the overview slide. This is the overview page, and you can dive deeper into each one of these volumes. But what this is going to show here is you've got your volume ID. Is it optimized? Is it not optimized? What's the volume type? What's the current size, current IOPS? And what's the recommended volume type? We can see here kind of in that middle piece there where we've got a GP2, and it actually is going to save us $3,000 a month if we go to this GP3 volume type. So there's usually a number of different recommendations. Now, I realized as a former guy who used to get the call at 3 in the morning when production would break, I say, don't just go by this alone. This is a data point. When you look at this page, when you dive deeper into some of the volumes, you're also going to be getting things like, oh, what happened there? You're going to be getting things like performance risk, right? Because you want to make sure you're testing this, right? What's your performance risk for these? What are the utilization metrics? So this is one data point. To me, this is a conversation starter for you and your company, your team, and your organization. This is a good conversation starter. Test it first. Test as much as you can. If you are going to make a change, you can make most of these changes without any downtime using EBS Elastic Volumes feature, which lets you modify your volumes. Usually, if you're going to increase space, if you're going to change your volume, if you're going to change your volume type, this can all be done online without having to take an outage. There are certain exceptions to this, especially if you're using some of the older instance types. But one thing I definitely recommend is if you are going to make these changes, even if the performance risk is low, definitely take a snapshot, back everything up first. This is just the old prod ops guy in me talking here, because what Compute Optimizer looks like and what your system may be. This is looking for the past 14 days. If something changed recently and Compute Optimizer wasn't aware of that, then that could really make things weird. But beyond that, this is a really nice tool to just take a look and say, okay, what am I over provisioned on? What am I under provisioned on? And this is really just going to help you right sizes. Plus, you can also export this. You can export this data in an S3 bucket. So if you wanted to use some sort of an automated tool, if you wanted to start doing something like scripting, I know, yes, this is a very manual process, but if you wanted to feed this into something that's going to do those volume changes for you, that's also a way to do that. This is in addition to the standard EC2 Compute Optimizer. So I know we're talking storage today, but also from a compute perspective, making use of EC2 Compute Optimizer can also make sure that you're right-sized properly on your compute instances as well. So this is a good start. So when I also talk to customers, I talk to them about EBS snapshots, right? And EBS snapshots have been around since even before I was working with AWS, and they're really great. I mean, this is what we use when we talk to customers about, hey, we want to protect the data on our EBS volumes. We want to make Amazon machine images, whether they're AMIs or AMIs. They're all EBS snapshots under the covers. We can share them across regions. We can share them across accounts. They're really great. But what I see customers, especially customers who have been around for a while, if they take a final snapshot of a volume and they just want to keep that around, or if they're taking lots of snapshots, right? Typically, I can start seeing them being burdened by snapshot costs. So I've been working with N2WS for quite some time. I worked with them when I was a customer. I worked with them when I was a partner, say at AWS. I'm proud to call them a friend now, and they were nice enough to invite me to AWS Fest. I'd like to talk about AnySnap Archiver. So N2WS N2WS, for those who don't know, has their what used to be called Cloud Protection Manager backup product. And back in Q3 of 2021, they introduced this AnySnap Archiver piece. And what this allows you to do is this allows you to take an EBS snapshot, whether it was created manually, whether it was created by one of our services. As long as it's an EBS snapshot, this can ingest this, and basically what it's going to do is it's going to read the data off the snapshot, and it's going to deposit that in your Amazon S3 bucket. So your Amazon S3 bucket, and now what you can do is, if you want to, you can delete that snapshot and take the cost savings away from it, or you can now have that in two places. Right, you can have that either you can still have the snapshot around, but now if you wanted to archive that, let's say you wanted to archive that into Glacier Instant Retrieval, or even Glacier Deep Archive, for example, right? Keep in mind, the cooler storage classes, the cooler you go, even if you're archiving this directly to S3, I wouldn't do this for anything that would require, say, a very aggressive recovery time objective, because if you ever had to restore that, you're going to need N2WS to basically take those pieces back from S3 and put those back together and create an ABS volume from it. But for especially where I see a great use case for this is if you've got a lot of EC2 instances, or you've got a lot of EBS volumes that no longer exist, and you've got these final snapshots that are just hanging around, and you're looking for a great way to do this. This AnySnap archiver from N2WS is a really great utility, and you don't even need to buy it. They allow you to try it out as part of their 30-day trial. So I did want to give them a plug, because it's a really powerful powerful cost savings option for customers. Might want to do some additional cost savings with their EBS snapshots. And now I want to talk about EFS Intelligent Tiering. This is something that, when I talk to customers about, they haven't really heard of before. So a lot of the EFS customers I talk to are only aware of EFS standard, right? And EFS standard is great. Or some that are aware of EFS standard and frequent access don't normally go to it, because they realize, I don't want to have to manage, I don't want to have to choose either or. Well, you don't have to anymore with EFS Intelligent Tiering. So basically with EFS Intelligent Tiering, the nice part about this is you're going to be creating a rule. And in that rule, you're going to basically be saying, when was the last time this file was accessed? You can choose anywhere from 7 to 90 days. And then if a file hasn't been accessed, let's say in the 7 days or the 90 days that you set up in that policy, it will then EFS will then transparently transfer that over to your infrequent access storage class. Should that file get accessed again, it won't stay in infrequent access. You'll be setting up that rule to say on first access, that file will be moved back to EFS standard. So you won't have to worry about anything like, okay, well, this is going to accumulate charges now for getting access in standard IA. No, it's going to get moved back to standard. There will be a data transition charge. But the nice part about that is this is completely managed for you behind the scenes. So if you're familiar with S3's intelligent tiering, I know we've already talked about that on this at AWS Fest. This is similar to that for EFS Intelligent Tiering. So this is a nice way to really help cost optimize some of your EFS storage. I know we've done a lot to drive down the price of EFS for our customers. We've also done a lot to drive down the latency of EFS for our customers over the year. There's been a lot of reInvent talks on that. Matter of fact, we just had a reInvent announcement last year to talk about continued lower latency of EFS. So the reason I say this is I talk to customers who say they just want that they love lower latency, and we're delivering it for them. So that's really all I have to talk about specifically with this. I know we didn't have a lot of, I don't have a lot of time. I wish I could do more demos, dive deeper. But John, I'm going to bring you back. Let's get some questions from the field, please.
All right. First of all, I like Compute Optimizer, and I like the. So I took some notes. What kind of cost optimization conversations are you having with customers?
Cost optimization conversations typically will start with S3, right? S3 is always, S3 is the cornerstone of most of my customers' conversations, and it's typically in terms of, hey, we're all in standard today. What can we do to help us with our bill, right? So it might be looking at something like intelligent tiering, might be something like a cooler storage classes, might be a combination of both. That's where we really dive deeper on the customer's workload, but really helping them understand what's available and what they can go to, and just kind of help them with a plan of action, POC, and also how to measure that success, right? It's one thing to say, hey, we've done this, but being able to measure that, being able to measure the savings and measure the outcomes of the work is also a really big part of any cost optimization initiative.
Anthony, who can customers engage with if they need help with optimizing the cost of their AWS workloads?
I would typically recommend, if you're an AWS customer, especially enterprise customer, or even a small SMB, like a small or medium-sized business customer, you have an AWS account team. I would definitely recommend reaching out to them as your first call. They have the tools. They can get the folks from the cost optimization team involved. They can get folks like myself involved, and really help be your quarterback to help kick off a nice cost optimization project for you.
Anthony, last question before we bring Giddy back on, because we have not only we have the Oculus and then we have the Xbox. We have our final magic trick coming up. So we're going to bring you back, or actually going to try to bring everybody back on stage for the final one.
Okay.
Is there any final words that you'd like to leave with the storage cost optimization that you want to share with the audience today?
One thing I'll say is a nice part about cost optimization is, yes, it frees up funds, but where I also see customers really help this, really use some of these cost optimizations exercises to their advantage is, let's say for example, you're saving $1,000 a month on your AWS bill as a result of these cost optimization initiatives. That's another $1,000 a month you could potentially have for another project, another AWS project you have. So if there are some AWS projects that you may just not have the funds for today, this is a good way to save in one place, but be able to pay that forward with another.
Nice.
My final parts before I see the. I'm kind of worried about the magic trick. So worried about the magic
Oh,
trick.
there's nothing to sweat.